The Fantasy Football Championship happens to fall during the best time of the year. It is Christmas week, and we've got Fantasy Football Championship matchups happening on Wednesday on Christmas. Then we have Thursday Night Football. Then we have a triple header on Saturday, and still we have our full Week 17 Sunday slate. So we are bringing you this episode, 24 different players to start or sit in your Fantasy Football Championships very early on in the week, because you all need to get prepped much earlier this week. We're going to cover quarterback starts and sits all the way through the tight end position. Fellas, with so much to cover here, I do want to give the note up front. You might watch this episode and say, hey, some of these names are kind of stupid obvious. That's because we're recording this on Monday afternoon before Monday Night Football without any sort of injury reports going into the week. We want to make sure in Week 17 you are starting the guys that we have the most confidence in without it being an episode full of Puka Nacua and AJ Brown, right? Like, they might seem less fringy than usual, but bear with us here because we normally do this episode on a Wednesday when we have some more information and not a Monday. I'm going to shut up now, and Cameron, I'm going to have you give us your quarterback start of the week.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Bo Nix on this one. And I know if you watched his last couple games, it has not been pretty from what we've seen on the film. If you are on YouTube and you're watching the All-22 from this last week, it is dink and dump after dink and dump after dink and dump. When I went to look up the film to try to find some more exciting plays, he had 2 throws of more than 10 air yards in this game against the Chargers, and he threw the ball 40 times. However, this team scores touchdowns, and that's what you want from a quarterback. He's had multi-touchdown games in 5 of his last 6. Like I said, I know it hasn't been pretty, but they find ways to get the ball in the end zone. He's got some decent rushing upside, and he plays Cincinnati this week. And don't let that DTR game fool you. Cincinnati is still bad at stopping the pass, right? I mean, just because Dorian Thompson-Robinson didn't, light them up doesn't mean that the Denver's not going to do pretty well against them. So yeah, I think he's going to continue to kind of roll. It's going to be gross, but I think the fantasy points at the end of the day are going to make you happy you started him.
Ty, bah humbug to you. You're not wearing any Christmas apparel, unlike Cameron and I, but give us your thoughts on Bo Nix this week.
Well, Bo Nix currently gets the memo of the Denver offense with the dink and dump stuff. I did not get the memo about the Christmas attire, but I'll let it slide this time. No, but Cam's right. Like, this team, this offense continues to put up points. Regardless of how it looks, they put up points, right? So in a game against Cincinnati, right? Cincinnati, they like to score a lot. Yes. That's their only way of winning. So Denver has to do the same if they want to win. And with all that's at stake in this game too, right? Cincinnati coming back into the playoff picture a little bit. They need to win this game. Yeah. Denver can clinch a playoff berth if they win this game. So there's a lot riding on this. This is one of my favorite games of the week. Not many people are going to talk about it, but I'm looking forward to watching that one.
Yeah, I haven't come through the over-unders yet for the week. I wouldn't be surprised if this is on the higher end, though, because Cameron, again, like you said, the Broncos score touchdowns, the Bengals score touchdowns. I think this could be a little bit of a firework affair here between these two teams. Ty, you've got a curious look on your face.
It's 49.5.
Yeah, I figured it'd be one of the higher ones of the week when Joe Burrow was tossing, 3+ touchdowns in basically every single game. So, the Bengals are putting up at least 21 points in this game. If Denver can fire back and put up 21, 24 of their own, you're going to get a high scoring affair here.
Sorry, one last note. Carolina Tampa Bay is also at 49.5. So
also doesn't surprise me.
That surprises me a little bit, but
because on a roll.
Right, yeah, Bryce Young's hot, baby. I mean, since you brought up Tampa Bay, Carolina, I'm gonna Ty. Normally, I come to you next. I'm just gonna skip to my quarterback start of the week because my quarterback start of the week is Baker Mayfield. Now, Baker Mayfield, since the Bucs Week 11 bye, 283 passing yards per game, which is 4th most in the league. He's averaging 8.73 yards per attempt, which is second to only Jordan Love, while completing over 71% of his passes. He only has one finish lower than the quarterback 9 during that stretch. And of course, the one game was against the Carolina Panthers. I'm not betting on that happening again, though, because the Panthers have allowed every other quarterback over the last 5 weeks to score 21 plus fantasy points against them outside of Baker Mayfield. This is a home game for Tampa Bay. Baker is averaging 272 passing yards per game at home this year. I have a whole lot of confidence starting Baker Mayfield this week. He's been on fire. This is one where I think he gets right against Carolina Panthers this week. And then again, Ty, a game that 49.5 total points. I think you could see Baker Mayfield light it up this week for 270 plus in a multi-score game as well.
I think my only worry is that they're just going to be able to run the ball the whole game.
Sure.
Not to spoil it, but one of the Tampa running backs is my start of the week, and
Sean
Carolina's giving up 200 yards per game over their last 6 on the ground. So that would be my only concern. But if Bryce Young continues to play the way that he has been, they're going to have to put up points, so that will force Baker Mayfield to throw the ball. And they need to win this game if they want to make the playoffs.
Yes.
Right? Losing that game to Dallas was bad. That was a bad loss. And so they need this game. So I think they're going to come out and just try and put Carolina away early, which could definitely benefit Baker.
The other thing is, too, this Carolina defense, still not very good, right? They are 29th in EPA per play allowed over the last 4 or 5 weeks. They are first in success rate allowed as well. I mean, Tampa Bay should have a field day against Carolina. So I guess, when I think about it, yeah, the point total makes a little bit of sense. But Baker, what was just a very weird game for Tampa. Like, you expected Tampa to have a little bit more in that game against Dallas. I'm expecting a bounce back here.
Yeah, in their last 4 contests, Carolina giving up the 4th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, even giving up that one game of 12 fantasy points to Baker Mayfield. So in a championship week, I have full confidence in Baker. I think you can actually fire him up this week if you need him for the consolation for 3rd place. Whatever game you're in this week where winning is important, Baker Mayfield, I think, can lead you to a winning game. I'll come back to your quarterback starting out, Ty. Who is it?
It's Jordan Love. And call me the pessimistic Vikings fan, but these late in the year Vikings Green Bay games, gosh, they are all Green Bay. I hate to admit it. That's just how it goes. Over the last 2 games for Jordan Love against a Brian Flores Vikings defense, he's thrown 256 yards and 349 yards. He's had 3 and 4 passing touchdowns in those games as well. He finishes a QB2 in both of those games as well in fantasy. Last 4 games haven't been the best for Jordan Love. He's only finished as a top 12 quarterback once, and I think he was literally the quarterback 12 on the week. He just hasn't needed to do a whole lot. I mean, Josh Jacobs has been absolutely feasting. He's had 18 or more carries in each game, and the average margin of victory for the Packers over the last 4 weeks, 22 points. So they have not needed Jordan Love to sling it around the field. I'm expecting a big Jordan Love game against this Minnesota defense that just allowed Geno Smith. Again, Geno Smith, very competent quarterback, but Geno was also not doing a whole lot, and Geno threw for 300 yards against him.
Yeah, I mean, again, we all know the weakness in the Vikings defense is their secondary. They're going to key in on Josh Jacobs and say, you know what, Jordan Love, throw to your plethora of pass catchers, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. We can't guess which one is going to have a big day, but we'll make sure to stop Josh Jacobs for sure. That's going to be plan A for the Minnesota Vikings. Cameron, Jordan Love must start for you this week?
Yeah, I would think so. After, we talked about him a little bit going into this week 16. Obviously, we're recording before Monday Night Football, so it could be completely different. But the worry about Jordan Love this week was he hasn't thrown over 30 pass. He's only thrown over 30 pass attempts once since week 7. But that's because, like Ty said, they're just putting teams away early. They're running the ball all over him. That's not going to happen against this Vikings team. They've been rolling on offense. They look good. Their defense looks good. It's going to be a much closer game. It's going to be more of a dogfight. So, yeah, I would look for Jordan Love to really have to throw the ball in this one. And that's the way you beat the Vikings is through the air. And so, yeah, I like Jordan Love a lot.
To wrap out the quarterback starts and sits here, we're going to play a little bit of a quarterback name game. But before we do, want to make sure that people know that we are going live on Sunday still before week 17. I'm announcing this like 6 days before it happens, right? But we will be going live on Sunday before Sunday's slate to finalize your lineup. So make sure you're subscribed, turn on those notifications as well. So you're alerted when we go live. You'll also be alerted when all of our newest content is up as well. We're not going anywhere during the offseason. We are posting dynasty content, NFL draft content, even going live, doing some underdog drafting throughout the offseason as well. So make sure you're subscribed. We're not going anywhere. Turn on those notifications. I promise you will fall in love with this YouTube channel because all we do is talk football and fantasy football around these parts. Would love to welcome you into the fellowship around here. How we're going to wrap up quarterback starts and sits this week. It feels weird to say, hey, don't play Aaron Rodgers this week because nobody is actually considering that in their championship matchup. So what we're going to do is we're going to play a little bit of a name game. We're each going to bring a player to the table, give like a sentence or two as to why people may actually be starting or sitting them this week. And we're all just going to give a one-word answer whether we are starting or sitting them in week 17. So Cameron, I'll let you bring your player to the table first. Ty, you and I can chime in with our thoughts of whether we'd start or sit him afterwards.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring Matthew Stafford. The Cardinals have been playing well, and I've talked about him multiple times. No rushing upside. He needs 250 and 2. Could he hit it? For sure, but I think Cardinals have been playing good enough where I just want to stay away from Stafford in week 17.
Ty, where are you at? You want to play or not play Stafford?
I really don't have a whole lot of interest in these kind of, I don't want to call Matt Stafford a point guard quarterback, but that's all he has to do is he just has to facilitate and distribute. And that's all that he's going to give you. If he throws for 220 and 2 touchdowns, it's not a bad week, but it's not going to be productive for fantasy.
I'm not overly interested in Matt Stafford this week. The Cardinals are eliminated from playoff contention. I don't think they're just going to lay down and give up this game, but also, this game doesn't have as much stakes in it as, if you would have asked me last week, I probably would have said this game could be uber competitive and have a whole lot on the line. That's not the case. The Rams still have playoff hopes, obviously, but no, not necessarily looking to play Matthew Stafford this week. Ty, who's your quarterback?
It's Brock Purdy. I really don't want anything to do with this Niners offense outside of George Kittle for the rest of the year. Over the last month, Brock Purdy is the QB 28 in expected fantasy points per game. No thanks. Moving on.
Cameron, any interest in Brock Purdy? This could be a fun game against Detroit.
Yeah, it could be, but similar to the Cardinals, 49ers aren't playing for a playoff spot, right? They're trying to play spoilers here. And so I don't know. And, Detroit, especially if Minnesota wins, they don't actually have a lot to play for in this game either, because the week 18 is then all that matters for them, whether they win or lose. So that's my worry, is that it's just kind of a gross game all around. So yeah, he's been very up and down lately, and I can see that continuing in this one.
I will say I'm most interested in Brock Purdy out of the 3 quarterback names we're going to talk about here, just because I think this Lions game could be fun. Like you said, if they're going to play spoiler, I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Shanahan puts it on this team and says, no, we're going to go out and make sure people still know we're relevant. We're not just laying down for anybody now. That being said, Brock Purdy feels like I have nobody better to play. So I'm just going to fire him up. I don't have like uber interest in pushing him into my lineup, but if you have to, you could certainly do a lot worse. He's probably the first name I would look at on our trio. My player is Tua Tagovailoa. He gave you 4 straight games with a quarterback 10 or better. He's now finished as a quarterback 23 and the quarterback 29 the last 2 weeks. Fantasy championship on the line. Tua Tagovailoa, in or out?
I don't know. Honestly, he's probably my favorite out of the 3, just because he is playing Cleveland, who I don't love. But at the same time, right, he needs a fantastic day, similar to Stafford, to pay off playing him this week. And so that would be my only issue. You probably have somebody else at this point in the year that you can pivot to, because he was out so much. So I probably would look to pivot, unless you obviously don't start like DTR this week.
How about you, Ty?
Yeah, when we've got every team playing, I bet you can find 12 better quarterbacks than Tua this week.
That's where I fall on Tua as well. You could probably find 2 other guys who will outperform, or 12 other guys who will outperform Tua. You could definitely find 2. Let's move on to the running back starts and sits here, fellas. Again, got a lot to cover here. So Cameron, I'm going to kick it over to you. Your running back start, again, I think is like a must start at this point, but this is the kind of name we want to make sure to hammer home in this episode, because this guy should be a must start, and no questions asked.
Yeah, it's Bucky Irving. And I think, we get just worried about sometimes running backs in committees, because you think, Rachaad White's still been involved. Is he going to get the full workload? It hasn't mattered. The dude's been awesome for fantasy football. He had 27.5 points against Carolina the last time they played. Rachaad White was out, so that's why he saw 20-plus carries. But like I talked about earlier with Baker, Carolina's allowing 200 rush yards a game. He's been their best rusher by far. And I think Rachaad White losing the game last week, giving up that fumble, could impact the way that they use him in this one, right? Because that was almost a must-win game for the Bucs. He goes out, he just gives away an easy fumble. But yeah, in his healthy games since the bye, he's had at least 90 plus yards. He's had a touchdown in 3 of those 4 games. And just with the way that Carolina, I mean, we saw that against James Conner. He only played like a half of football and had 25 fantasy points because he was just destroying this defense. I think that keeps up with in this one. I think both Bucky and Rashad White can both have great games.
4 straight running backs have totaled at least 110 rushing yards against this Panthers defense. I wouldn't be surprised if Buck makes that 5 straight this week. You're obviously in on Bucky Irving this week too, I got to imagine.
Yeah, well, some of us have been in on Bucky Irving since the beginning of the year, and that we never said that he could get tackled by a gust of wind. But anyway, Bucky Irving has been on fire. There's no reason to doubt him at this point. Yeah, shot fired. That's for taking the shot at me for not getting the memo about the Christmas dress up game.
Hey, I mean, it's fair, and it is fair critique. Like, my size was a major concern for me on Bucky Irving. I was concerned, like his contact balance. Some people were like, "Oh, he's got great contact balance." I'm like, I think it's fine, but at the next level, I don't know how Bucky Irving is gonna exactly carve out a major role for himself. On how look at me now. I'm looking pretty silly, fading Bucky Irving out of the NFL draft. But yes, he is a must start this week, similar to your running back start, Ty. Which again, this is probably the most like, yes, of course, name of the week. But prior to last week, I do think people were starting to have question marks around this running back.
Oh, yeah. Hey, let me tell you, recency bias is a heck of a drug. Okay. There's nothing quite like some recency bias. Okay. Jonathan Taylor rushed for over 100 yards in back-to-back games since the bye week on 22 carries, 29 carries, and then obviously last week popping out for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, right? This was the performance that you had been waiting on pretty much all year from Jonathan Taylor, and it sucks that it happened probably when you're out of the playoff picture, but hey, it probably saved you from whatever elimination or whatever punishment that you have to do for finishing in last place in your league. But back to Jonathan Taylor, 21, 24, 11, and 25 carries since week 10. The guy gets the rock. So it's really just a matchup thing. Yes, Tennessee's defense, specifically the run defense, has not been as good as it was at the beginning of the season. Now he gets the Giants, and the Giants have been a little bit better against the run, but I'm not expecting this Colts-Giants game to be close. I'm still expecting Jonathan Taylor to get a ton of touches. I'm expecting him to find the end zone once. I wouldn't be surprised if he falls in twice. I mean, Jonathan Taylor should continue to come through for you in fantasy playoffs.
It's going to be easy to hide Anthony Richardson against this Giants defense. I mean, I think that's the big thing here. Like, Anthony Richardson, it hasn't been great football still, right? He's still obviously learning. Lamar Jackson absolutely carved up the Giants. So, quarterbacks can obviously throw here. But if I'm the Indianapolis Colts, screw that. Give Jonathan Taylor the rock if he's hot right now. If we can keep the ball out of Anthony Richardson's hands, by all means, I think they're going to do that against the Giants. Would you agree with that, Cameron?
Yeah, I think we forget how talented Jonathan Taylor is. I think we get a little bit of Saquon on the Giants. Right. I think Saquon right now is the best back in the NFL. So I'm not saying Jonathan Taylor is, there, but I think when he's healthy, he is a top 5 back in the NFL because he is just so unbelievably talented. And I think we forget that when we see, 7 fantasy points against the Jets, 3.5 against Detroit. What we saw against Tennessee, he is capable of every single week, no matter the matchup. And I think that's why you have to continue to put him in your lineup.
Yeah, 100%. No questions. You are firing up Jonathan Taylor this week. My running back start, I need to give a massive disclaimer on because it's Zach Charbonnet, but Ken Walker left Sunday's game against Minnesota early with an ankle injury. And as of this recording, we do not know the severity. For me, on a short week, though, on Thursday Night Football against the Bears, I find it hard to believe that Kenneth Walker is going to suit up. So assuming that, I'm going to make Zach Charbonnet my start. But again, by the time you listen to this recording or by the time you're actually making lineup decisions, that may all actually change and Ken Walker's playing. I digress. When Zach Charbonnet has been the starting running back for the Seattle Seahawks for 2 weeks while Kenneth Walker dealt with calf injury, finished as the overall running back 1 and the running back 17. He was averaging over 6 yards per carry in those games, and he scored 3 times on the ground. You look at the Chicago Bears, they have been getting absolutely schooled on the ground recently by running backs. Fourth most fantasy points per game allowed to running backs in the last 4 weeks. They've given up a league high 6 touchdowns to running backs during that stretch, and they are top 5 in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs in their last 5 games. This has Zach Charbonnet written all over it. Outdoors, in Chicago, on the road, short week, feed the running back. Let's just get right for week 18 and get this team back on track. So Zach Charbonnet will be my running back start of the week, assuming he is Seattle's lead back for Thursday Night Football.
I would agree that I think he's probably going to start, Walker missing the 2 games before this game with a calf injury. Now injures the ankle. They said he was limping around pretty severely after the game. And like you said,
shut him down for the season, man.
Short week on top of it. So, I do think that all kind of comes into play. Even if he is playing, you got to imagine they can't be giving the full workload. Charbonnet's probably still you should probably find your starting lineup against this Bears team. Obviously, he's not the same must start if Walker plays, but I do think that the role is going to be big enough if Walker's playing, partially hurt in this one, that you could still fire up Charbonnet in a lineup.
Yeah. Seahawks are 8-7. They have like a 14% chance of making the playoffs. They're on the bubble. They're not really in the hunt. They're on the bubble for the hunt. I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle's just like, no, we'll ride Charbonnet if we make the playoffs and we can bring back Ken Walker. Wouldn't surprise me if they just say, no, Walker, we're going to keep you out this week for sure on a short week. If we need you in week 18, we'll bring you back. But that's the route I got to imagine they're taking is give Ken Walker the rest this week. If they need him in week 18, they'll bring him back. Otherwise, he's probably done for the year would be my guess. But again, we'll learn more as the week goes on. Yeah. Where's your confidence in Zach Charbonnet if he is indeed the starter this week, Ty?
Oh boy. I mean, matchup with what we were seeing without Kenneth Walker, there is legit top 12 upside, I think, with Zach Charbonnet.
Totally.
I mean, there's a reason why we were kind of picking on Chicago in a lot of our running back starts in previous weeks.
They're so bad.
They're so bad. They are so bad, right? So Zach Charbonnet with the full workload. Seattle, I would assume Seattle can control that game too. So he's virtually a lock for top 12 in my opinion.
Let's move on to running back sits this week. We can kind of blow through these a little bit more quickly. Again, we have a full slate this week. We have a lot of guys who are fringy, could probably actually play ahead of these guys this week. Cameron, I'll start with you. Who's your running back sit this week?
It's Rico Dowdle. And I'll be honest, I don't think it's as much about what we saw in this last game as it is about who he's playing this week,
Sure.
right? Because the volume had been good the 3 games prior, but he did have 13 attempts for only 23 yards in this last one, which is a killer. If you're in the semifinal, you can ask Ty about that. But
Yikes.
But his previous top 4 his previous 4 top 20 finishes that they had before this were all against bottom 10 defenses, and Philly has been one of the top defenses against the run. I would imagine that they play him strong, right? They want to continue to try and fight to see if they can find a way to get into that number 1 spot. They need a couple things to go their way after that loss. Obviously, if Jalen Hurts doesn't play, maybe it gets a little bit better for him, but I think the defense is tough enough, and he had 8.6 against them last game, that I just don't think there's a lot of upside for Dowdle in this one.
Ty, where are you at on Rico Dowdle this week? I'm with you. This feels more matchup, less about what we just saw. So I agree with Cameron on that, but where are you at on Rico Dowdle?
I'm the same way. I mean, we had Brian Robinson as like a fringe top 25 guy in our rankings last week because of the matchup. And we also know that, like, I think we had some hope a little bit just because it is Washington, right? This Dallas offense, yeah, they did just beat Tampa Bay. I still don't know what to make of their offense. So I think it's best to just avoid it than try to take the risk or try to get cute with it.
Yeah, Tampa Bay's defense is not Philly's defense. With the defense that's just playing so well right now, yeah, I have little to no interest in Rico Dowdle this week in a low upside matchup. I'd much rather target a higher upside matchup. Ty, who's your running back sit this week?
Yeah, Brian Robinson. Reason why I brought up Brian Robinson was exactly for this. Let's take a moment of silence for our guy, Brian Robinson. He didn't get hurt or anything. It's just not great. Okay, my moment of silence has passed. Since coming back from his hamstring injury in week 11, Brian Robinson has gone 3.9, 2.6, 6.4, 3.1, and 2.4 yards per carry. He hasn't topped 4 yards per carry except for one game, and he's the running back 34 in points per game. Now he gets Atlanta, and Atlanta has been very good against the run as of late, ever since week 11. So in that same stretch, 6th lowest rush EPA, 13th lowest success rate, 2nd fewest rushing yards per game, 4th fewest yards per carry, only 2 rushing touchdowns allowed per game. That's the only reason why you want to be Rob in your lineup, was because he was going to score. This is just not the week for it.
I could see teams wanting to fire up B-Rob still. My guess is that if you're in the championship, B-Rob is not one of the pieces that was on your team. If he is, though, my guess is that you probably have higher upside options than Brian Robinson Jr. Where is Brian Robinson Jr. going to fall in your rankings, Cameron, do you think?
I would imagine he's outside the top 25. He just, what Ty said, it's just been so inefficient lately. Even against New Orleans, 21 attempts, and he can muster up 11.7 PPR fantasy points.
Yeah, right.
It's just been gross all around. Jaden Daniels has been rolling. Got to imagine they just continue to lead on him. There's no reason not to. He just put up 5 touchdowns against one of the best defenses in the NFL last week.
Yep.
See, I'm definitely out on Brian Robinson this week, because that 2.1 that he had last week could easily have again this week.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Washington Commanders offense a little bit more after our break, but my running back sit of the week is Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. And again, this is just a very similar theme here. He's just a low ceiling option with the fantasy championship on the line. I just don't care to have a low ceiling in my lineup. In his last 6 games, Ramondre has only given you 2 finishes as a top 24 running back, and he hasn't eclipsed more than 13 fantasy points in a single game. And the big concern during that stretch too, he's caught 1 or less passes in 4 of his last 6 games. So he's not even giving you any PPR upside, which is what he has been known for in previous years. The Chargers aren't like the worst matchup in the world for running backs, but even averaging 5 yards per carry and scoring a touchdown last week, Ramondre only gave you 12.3 fantasy points and a running back 25 finish, prior to Monday Night Football. And I imagine that's probably going to be running back 26. And if Kendre Miller has a decent night, that could be the running back 27 even. So if you're competing for a fantasy championship, I just don't know how you can put a guy in your lineup who is like a guaranteed 6 to 13 fantasy points, and you could probably bet on that and be right 80% of the time with Ramondre Stevenson this year. So no interest, no upside for me. You have higher upside options you can slide into your flex. I'm playing majority of wide receivers on the bubble ahead of Ramondre this week.
Yeah, it was a plus. Ended up being, a good matchup for him.
Right.
The game was tied going into half. They were up going in the first half.
Yeah,
tied deep into the third quarter. So there were plenty of times where they could have run the ball, and yet he still only gets 12 carries. It just doesn't look pretty for him. And like you said, it's not a great matchup. Chargers, they want to continue to win to make sure that they lock in that 5 seed. So yeah, I just don't see the upside anymore with Ramondre Stevenson.
We're starting to see Antonio Gibson a little bit more here too, which I do think factors into a little bit of that receiving work, a little bit of the full workload being taken away from him as well, obviously. Ty, you have any interest in Ramondre in any capacity?
I feel he's going to be in the same tier as Brian Robinson and probably Rico Dowdle as well. Just guys that like little to no upside. I don't care about how good the matchup can be. Some of these, Brian Robinson, Rico Dowdle don't have the greatest matchups. Ramondre's upside is just severely capped when we're getting outsnapped by Antonio Gibson.
Before we move on to the pass catching start and sits this week, fellas, let's take a quick break here from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code fellas when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We're going to keep cruising through this episode. We got a lot more names to cover on a very full Week 17 championship slate. Let's move on to the wide receiver starts. Cameron, who are you firing up this week?
Firing up Keenan Allen. And it's been absolutely ridiculous in Chicago since Matt Eberflus got fired. This dude is seeing a 34.4% target share since Eberflus was fired. He is the wide receiver 6 since then. He is second in targets behind only Malik Neighbors. He is second in touchdowns. And now he gets the Seahawks, who are allowing the 12th most yards to slot wide receivers over the last 5. He honestly reminds me of late career Anquan Bolden, where you watch him out there and you go, you aren't even moving. Like, how are you open all the time? You got a piano hitched to your back, but it's because he understands the zones. He understands how to play the position really well, right? Keenan Allen's never been a burner by any means. He's always been a smart wide receiver who gets open. And that's what we're seeing right now. Caleb Williams clearly trusts him in every situation. And so I would just continue with the hot hand. I would continue throwing Keenan Allen out there. Really, and I guess this is the last matchup that matters as long as your league is run correctly. So it's like, I would definitely fire up Keenan Allen in this one.
Seattle, middle of the pack in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers this year, but again, it's not a bad when you're seeing a nearly 35% target share. Sometimes volume is just king. We typically say that about running backs, but that does typically tend to be the case for wide receivers as well. Ty, where are you at on Keenan Allen? For me, it's not like it doesn't scream great matchup, but again, I could fall back on the volume and say, yeah, Keenan Allen's a fine play this week.
Yeah, I mean, Keenan Allen is like he was kind of like how I was feeling about Adam Thielen a couple of weeks ago, of just like, wow, it's a good game. Oh, another good game. Keenan Allen, literally Minnesota and then Detroit. Oh, look at that. 2 good games. Like, it's one of those, like, you're just going to start him because it has been so good, but you're not like thrilled. You're not super excited about it, but he's been getting it done, right? So you're not going to go away from it. And if you do, it's because you've got like a much better option than Keenan Allen.
Ty, I'll come right back to you. Who's your wide receiver start?
It's another rookie wide receiver on the Chiefs that's breaking out late in the season. It's Xavier Worthy. I mean, how does this happen? It's 2 receivers back-to-back years. Look, Xavier Worthy in his last 2 games, he's gotten 11 targets in each of those games.
Yeah.
So he's been targeted a bunch. He's gone for 19.6, 20.5 fantasy points in those games. Yes, finding the end zone obviously helps. But the thing is, this Chiefs offense has been getting a little bit better. They have been covering the spread the last 2 weeks because their offense is actually doing well. Since week 11, Xavier Worthy is the wide receiver 25 in points per game on the wide receiver 18 usage. So it's lining up when you look at it from that standpoint. In this Pittsburgh defense, they're reeling a little bit. I think people are starting to kind of see that this Steelers defense is not playing as well as they were earlier this year. I mean, Baltimore's a great offense, but 34 points in a Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, it seems a little fishy, right? And when you look at advanced metrics and all that stuff, Pittsburgh is top 10 in EPA per allowed, success rate, all those things on defense. So teams are, again, it just proves that teams are finding success against the Steelers defense. I'm expecting Worthy, maybe not to put up 19 and 20 again, but I think he can still have a very good week.
Steelers bottom 10 in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. Again, I'm starting to use schedule adjusted because this is the time of the year where we're trying to eliminate some of those outlier matchups. We're trying to find a more holistic picture of how many fantasy points are these teams giving up when it matters most during the season. So how do you remedy that, Cameron? Is it truly the volume for Xavier Worthy? Is it when you look at the Baltimore game last week, like Ty brought up, like how do you remedy this fact that, like, actually, despite a seemingly tough matchup, Xavier Worthy could end up being a fine play?
Yeah, I think they're starting to use him not necessarily in the Rashee Rice role, but in the Rashee Rice area of the field. Over his last 3 games, he's seen only a 7.3 ADOT. Right, his yards per reception has been increasingly low, 8.2, 7.7, 9.3. So you're using him closer to the line of scrimmage. And yeah, the volumes just continue to go up. My only concern is Hollywood saw 8 targets on only 27% of snaps. Got to imagine that they continue to ramp that up a little bit, but they're going to be used in separate parts of the field, right? I don't think Hollywood's going to come in and take over Xavier Worthy's role as of this point. They want to just try and get him open in space. They want to, use his speed to his advantage. And so, yeah, I'm going to bank on those 11 targets. I have that decision in a dynasty matchup where I'm going to go for an undefeated season. And I'm going to be starting Xavier Worthy over Devonta Smith this week. That's how much I believe in Worthy right now, even though, like you said, it's not a great matchup against the Steelers.
Yeah, I think you can fire up Xavier Worthy this week. And like at some point, like it's not that Xavier isn't running these deep routes anymore. At some point, one of those has to hit with Mahomes. And once you know the week that you question it is probably going to be the week that it happens. So now that I say that, Xavier Worthy is just going to get everything within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, and it won't happen. But I digress. I think Xavier Worthy could end up being a fine play this week. He's not like the most exciting play for me this week, but if you need to put him in your flex, I do think he's a very viable flex option. This is probably the third most obvious name on our list, but again, given the context of when we're recording this, given when games are happening this week, we're trying to give you guys that's like, you know what? Just play the guys you have confidence in. All right. And Terry McLaurin absolutely has to be one of those guys. He defied the odds last week. He gave us a wide receiver 17 finish against Philadelphia, caught 5 of his 6 targets for 60 yards and a score. And he should absolutely feast on the Atlanta Falcons this week. Because over the last month, they've given up the 6th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. They're first in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position, and they are second in schedule adjusted points allowed on the entire season. Like you said, Ty, this Atlanta Falcons defense is the run defense is a little bit stingy here, but their secondary can absolutely be taken advantage of. So in a game where Jaden Daniels could absolutely just keep fire from his game against Philly last week, I find it hard to believe he doesn't light up the Atlanta Falcons secondary again this week. And Terry McLaurin, could legitimately give you a league-winning top 5 finish this week. If he goes off for like 25 plus this week, I wouldn't be surprised in the least. He could definitely be bringing you home a title.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at his stats when you like go back to the beginning of the season, because the volume's low, like we thought it was gonna be. Right, he's only seen 98 targets on the year, but he's seen 1,000 yards. But it's the touchdowns for a dude that's had 4, 5 touchdowns to be second in the NFL with 12 touchdowns is crazy. But it's almost becoming something that you can continue to bank on week after week. He scored a touchdown.
Mike Evans-esque.
Yes, yeah, but 6 touchdowns over his last 4 games, touchdown in each. Got to imagine they continue to look for him, and he's still making big plays down the field. And Jaden Daniels loves to look his way. So yeah, I'm definitely all for firing up Terry. He should be a lineup lock this week.
Ty, you have any questions on Terry McLaurin this week? It's pretty much a lineup lock across the board. I don't want to spend too much time on here unless if you have major questions.
No, I mean, we know the range of outcomes for quarterbacks against this Falcons defense, right? We saw Sam Darnold throw 5 touchdowns, and then we saw Drew Lock and the Giants fall absolutely on his face.
That's
right?
Drew Lock. Come on.
Right, but that's the point, right? Like, are we going to put Jaden Daniels, like, are we going to skew it towards the Giants and Drew Lock? Heck no. We're going to skew that towards, like, Sam Darnold and the Vikings performance. So definitely continue to rely on Terry this week.
Wide receiver sits. Let's fly through these fellas. Cameron, who's your wide receiver sit?
I'm going with Jameson Williams this week. And I'm really going to do with the matchup. Yeah, because it's interesting when you look at his stats. He is, since week 3, he either gets a long touchdown or he finishes outside the top 30 wide receivers. Yeah. It has consistently been that. He's got 4 games inside the top 30. All 4 games, he's seen a touchdown of 40 yards or more. Over their last 5 games, San Francisco is allowing less than 1 reception a game with an air yards over 20 plus yards. And they're allowing the 4th fewest yards on completions between 10 and 19 yards in that same time frame. So what that just means is they're capping teams, right? They're not letting you beat them with the big play. They're keeping things closer to the line of scrimmage. And like you said, Jameson Williams needs that big play in order to have a big week, because since week 3, right, we saw it in week 1 and 2, we were, Jameson Williams is going to see this crazy volume, and it just never kept up. He's kind of been more relegated to that deep threat. They're still using him more than I think we thought they would, but I just don't see him hitting the big one this week. And if you're in your fantasy championship, right, you can throw him out there if you're like, hey, I'm the 6th seed in the playoffs. I'm not supposed to be here. I have no idea what happened. I just got here because the other 2 teams threw up stinkers and I'm playing some juggernaut and I need a huge game. Then yeah, sure. If you need to take kind of the lottery ticket approach, you can go with Jameson Williams. Other than that, I just don't have any interest in throwing him in my lineup.
Yeah, the key word here is volatility. With Jameson Williams is that he could give you the big one, or he could give you 5 fantasy points on the weekend and give you a borderline dud in your flex. Do you share the same concerns around Jameson Williams, Ty?
Yeah, I do. I was literally saying it to somebody this weekend. I was like, the only time that Jameson Williams is a worthy start in your lineup is if he hits the big play. I just don't think that happens against a defense allowing the fewest receiving yards to wide receivers on the year, 3rd fewest receptions. Like San Francisco is reeling, but they've been still pretty good against receivers. So I think this is a good week to pass on Jameson.
I do like what you mentioned about the lottery ticket approach, Cameron, because that's where I'm playing Jameson Williams this week. If I need a home run hitter in my flex, Jameson Williams is one of your best bets to be a home run hitter, right? But he's either going to hit a home run or strike out, right? Like that. It's an Aaron Judge approach with him if you follow the MLB, right? He's either going to hit the big one, or it's or he might give you a stinker in your lineup. So, I don't know if for me personally, I don't know if I'm outright calling Jameson Williams a sit, but if I am in the championship and I can keep the game competitive, I am going to try and avoid volatility to the level of Jameson Williams. Obviously, you're going to have to take some chances and take some risks, but you know the range of outcomes for Jameson Williams is just a little bit too broad for my liking. So I'm okay if you do pass on Jameson Williams this week against the 49ers. Ty, your wide receiver sit of the week. It's just unfortunate that we're here, but we're here. You should have zero interest in playing this player during the championship, I fear.
Yeah, Maserati Marv is no longer Maserati Marv in this Arizona offense.
Oh, jeez.
Since coming back from the bye week, so week 12 on, he's the wide receiver 57 in points per game. He's 51st in targets per route run. He's 76th in yards per route run. He hasn't topped 60 receiving yards or 5 receptions in those games either. We've been wanting something to change for Marvin Harrison the entire year, and it just hasn't happened. I don't think it's going to at this point in the season. Now that he gets the Rams' 7th fewest fantasy points per game to the position, 9th fewest receptions. Yes, he did have a good game against them earlier this year, but this Rams defense, this Rams team is much different than from where they were in week 3. So yeah, it's time to keep Marv on your bench.
Is it bad that I think this could be the one game that Marv just like absolutely goes nuts in? The Cardinals are eliminated from the playoffs. They say, F it. Why don't we just have some playground time? And it's just Kyler and Marv doing whatever the heck they want to do. And I understand that it's like, okay, Kyler's playing playground football and Marv is just such a technician that those play styles don't entirely mesh. I look that is not reason for me. That is not reason for you to just say like, oh well, yeah, I'm gonna play Marv, right? But like, I got that feeling. Like, I wonder if this is the week they just go full playground and it's like, all right, Marv, here you go, 35% target share, 8 receptions for 120 yards and a score, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Marv comes out and gives you that this week, but I'm certainly not going to sit here and be willing to put him ahead of at least 25 to 30 other wide receivers this week. I got too many question marks still.
Yeah, I will say Lucas's last time trusting his gut was Deebo Samuel putting up 4 points. So I don't know if I do.
I was waiting for someone to mention
I'm all for
that.
trusting your gut.
I was a week early. Deebo had a great week this last week. I was just a week early.
Yeah, they use him too much on 50-50 balls, and that's not the kind of wide receiver that he necessarily
is. He's not winning
them
either.
He's more of the route technician, right? He's going to get early timing routes. Kyler hasn't been throwing those. I just think they need a reset kind of in the offense to get everyone on the same page, take another offseason. I'm not trusting Marv in a championship game. I don't trust him in a 3rd place game. I really would rather not trust him in a toilet bowl game either. So I don't really want anything to do with him this week.
in a toilet bowl game, I can at least say I went down with the ship with Marv.
That's true.
I'm at least willing to say that of like, you know what, I at least went down with the ship, and I didn't waver at all. If Marv does have a big, I digress though. I'm ranking Jerry Jeudy below Marv this week though, because my gosh, I really only need to give you one reason as to why you should sit Jerry Jeudy. And it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I mean, 2 receptions on 3 targets for 20 yards last week against the Bengals. That was Jerry Jeudy's 3rd lowest output of the entire season. And I think this is Miami Dolphins defense. I am just worried they could absolutely feast on the Cleveland Browns offense this week. Cleveland, they are giving up 4.2 sacks per game this year. That leads the league. And the Dolphins have given up the 8th fewest total points in the league this year. That, to me, does not bode well for Dorian Thompson-Robinson-led offense that you already know is going to struggle to put up 10 points in a game. Jerry Jeudy's just not going to be a part of that. So if you're seriously considering trusting a Cleveland Browns wide receiver in your championship, that's just not a risk you need to take whatsoever. So Jerry Jeudy, like, I saw all I needed to see last week. It's about as exactly as I expected it to go. No interest in Jerry Jeudy this week. He can ride the pine.
Yeah, it's tough because DTR is dealing with calf injury. So let's say it goes downhill, he doesn't play. Jameis is dealing with a shoulder injury, which means you'll get Bailey Zappi. So it's not like it's gonna get better if DTR is not in, most likely. So it's just like you said,
legacy game from Bailey Zappi to Jerry Jeudy in the face.
Which could happen, but I'm not gonna bet on it against Miami. No. Like you said, there's just too much unknowns. Even if Jameis is in, right, and we know he's dealing with shoulder injury, Jameis is inaccurate as is. So it's just like, I don't know. I would stay away from Jerry Jeudy in this one.
At least with Jameis, I know he can chase the points. Though, 4 interceptions against the Chiefs doesn't exactly inspire confidence in me after his kind of miracle run, his Cinderella run he went on there. Ty, I got to imagine you're in the same boat. No interest in Jerry Jeudy?
Yeah, I think we all had the gut feeling that Dorian Thompson-Robinson was not going to produce much for fantasy.
It's not even a gut feeling. It's just like you could watch the film and just say this dude stinks. like career completion percentage of 51%. He wasn't going to accomplish anything. We knew this.
I mean, it is a bit of a weird kind of victory lap to be like, yeah, we called it. We called it.
Not even a victory lap.
No, why would it change this week? Right? Like we're not going to see anything drastic enough to make a difference for Jerry Jeudy.
That would be literally the worst victory lap in the history of victory laps. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is bad. Therefore, his wide receivers will be bad. Victory lap it. We're smart.
Hey, what is the therefore?
Hey, okay. All right. Now we're getting into inductive Bible study here. That's what I like to hear. Good for all my university friends watching the podcast right now. Let's wrap it up, fellas. Tight end starts and sits of the week. People are like, university, what are we talking about here? The deep lore between the three of us. Tight end starts and sits. Let's kind of blow through these here. Again, tight end, we're not getting cute with it this week. And at this point, there's kind of just been 10 tight ends who have weeded themselves out and have said, yes, we are the 10 you should trust. Anybody else is a massive question mark. So Cameron, it was between your start and my start, who I was going to take. So I was kind enough to give you the Miami Dolphins tight end here, who I think will have another smash spot here in week 17.
Yeah, Mike Gesicki. No, Jonnu Smith. Yeah,
Rock team.
This is honestly cheating at this point. He's the tight end in the season. Since week 11, he's been a top 10 tight end. He's been a top 7 every single week except last week. He's seeing the volume, seeing the yards, he's scoring touchdowns. There's really not much to like about him. He's in Cleveland's has not been the greatest pass defense. So even if Tua has an off day, Jonnu's still going to get his. They're using him all over the field. Yeah, you fire up Jonnu. Don't think about it. Just put him in your lineup.
Yeah, just fire him up. No questions asked. Play Jonnu this week. Ty, your tight end start of the week is a little bit interesting to me because he was one I almost brought up for our name game portion of this episode, but you decided to make him your start of the week.
Yeah, it's TJ Hawkinson. This one, I very much feel like I'm talking... this is much more of a bold projection than it is like a safe bet or anything like a Jonnu Smith is. But 7th most fantasy points per game to the position. Green Bay is allowing over the last month, 3rd most receptions, 5th most receiving yards. I know one of those games was from Jonnu Smith, who did have a decent game, but I have a feeling that, look, Jair Alexander, I'm not going to be surprised if he doesn't play on Monday Night Football because he's resting for the big game against the Vikings. Like he always does every single year. And when that happens, Vikings receivers are going to have a tougher time. I'll just say it like that. So I think Hawkinson could be targeted pretty often just as the guy that's going to be over the middle of the field.
Yeah, I'm going to take Cleveland Browns center David Njoku this week. And I know I just said to sit Jerry Jeudy, but I am much more of a fan of tight ends being a backup quarterback's best friend here. And that's a logic we're going with because we just saw that, right? 8 receptions on 10 targets for Njoku last week for 66 yards. That was good for 14.5 fantasy points in PPR formats. Currently the tight end 5 going into Monday Night Football. Miami Dolphins, perfectly fine matchup. Tight ends have been targeted the 2nd most times against the Dolphins this year. Top 5 in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position in their last 5 as well. So I'm just going to bank on volume. I'm going to bank on a PPR scam here from David Njoku. He could give you another 6, 7, 8 receptions for 60, 70 yards this week. Ty, you have your hand raised. Yes, sir.
I would like to change my wide receiver start.
To who?
To George Pickens because he was a full participant on Monday's practice, so he should be playing on Wednesday.
You have interest in playing George Pickens now. I don't know if I do.
He can be your start B.
He can be your start B.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Cool.
Whatever, that's fine. He could be your start B. Tight ends. Let's bring up a few tight ends because there might be some teams that are like, dude, I've been streaming tight ends. I'm somehow in the championship. I need the big one. Should I actually play this guy? Or again, you might be avoiding a league punishment and you're like, I need a desperation play at tight end because I got to this spot because I don't have a tight end. So similar to quarterback sits, let's throw out a few names, quick discuss whether we have any interest in them or not. Cameron, I'll start with you. Who's the name you want to bring up?
Jake Ferguson.
No.
I know he saw 9 targets and 6 receptions last game, but he's playing in Philly after they just lost the last minute game. I think this is going to be such a gross game. I want nothing to do with it.
No, absolutely not. Ty?
No, thanks.
Okay, all right. We're all hard pass on Jake Ferguson. I think he's droppable at this point. I know the volume's there, but if he's not giving you anything, he's untrustable in your lineup with Cooper Rush. Ty, I'll let you bring up your name here.
Dalton Kincaid, because why would you at this point?
So you're saying to sit him.
Yep. You should.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Again, he's not one of those guys that cracks that like, yes, top 10, absolutely need to. I don't hate the matchup with the Jets this week, though.
Oh, maybe I'll say it this way. I'd rather start your sit than play Dalton Kincaid.
I would agree. I actually think I would agree with that. Yeah, I tried to bring up a guy who, Cameron, you have any interest in Dalton Kincaid before I get to mine?
No, just like I was looking at his catch rate percent. It is the lowest out of any tight end with 50 targets on the season. He's 60.9%. So they're just not connecting on anything. So yeah, I'm out on that.
So my name that I want to bring up is Chikakonkwo. Because this dude, 13.9, 19.1 in his last 2 games. He has given you a tight end 7 and a tight end 2 finish. He has drawn 21 targets over the last 2 weeks and has caught 17 of those. We getting jiggy with it this week?
If I'm throwing a dart throw, I'm going to chase. if I'm looking at Jake Ferguson or Chig, I'm gonna chase it. But yeah. I think you gotta, right? At this point.
I agree. I 100% agree. He is going to be my favorite dart throw tight end this week. Like if this wasn't a championship week and we weren't trying to get a little bit more deep into our bag, so teams had plenty of options. Chig probably would have been my start of the week. Ty, you get jiggy with it?
I'll say it like this. There's a break in our document between the tight end starts and sits. I hadn't scrolled all the way down to the sits. So before I chose TJ Hawkinson, I was like, you know what? I might do Chigakonkwo. And then I scrolled down and it was.
Oh, you could have had him.
Like,
you could have taken him. I would have vouched for you.
Well, now I feel bad because now I feel like
Hawkinson was good. I like it. I like
Thank
Hawkinson.
you from the
Stay
Vikings
with
fan.
that.
Thank you.
Ty's having like an
No.
identity crisis today. He's like, do I want Xavier Worthy or George? I don't know who I am anymore. Do I? TJ Hawkinson, I don't know.
We should just start the whole recording over at this point.
All right, we'll
I
run
just
it
have
back
a completely new list.
I
of
was
stuff.
telling me he wanted to start Justin Fields, so I mean, that was
Mike Tomlin said, "Hey, you know what?"
Baby. I mean,
Mike Tomlin said he has a chance to play this week. Guys who haven't played in the past week, they got a chance to play this week. Justin Fields is one of those people he named. Oh, there you have it. Championship week starts and sits. If you have more questions, you can hop over into our Discord as well. That is down in the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video you are listening to. Again, we are going live on Sunday before kickoff as well. I know there will have been 5 games played at that point, but maybe you still need to get a few spots right in your lineup. We'll make sure to get you right before week 17. So make sure you subscribe and turn on those notifications as well so you know when we go live. You'll also know when our newest video content is up as well because we ain't going nowhere.
no, sir.
We're here for the entire offseason. We're covering NFL draft. We're covering dynasty formats. We're talking about it all. So make sure you subscribe, become part of the fellowship here because we will continue to make you a fantasy championship, not just in your redraft leagues, in your dynasty leagues. In any fantasy football format you play, we are here for you. I am at Lucas Wencl on Twitter, Camlaw FFF for Cameron, Tyler_Plath for Ty. If you want to follow the fellas accounts as well, FFL is on Twitter, the FFL is on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and YouTube. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to you all. Best of luck in your championship matchups, and we will see you on Sunday for our Start Sit Live. Stay safe, y'all. Have a happy holiday. We'll see you soon. Deuces.
Deuces.